49. The last president inaugurated in the United States. The span of terrible days after the global comms blackout when the world was reshaped. The number of strange supernatural phenomena that appear around the globe. You're listening to The 49, the new series by Andrew Kooman. Get the content right in your inbox when you subscribe at the49.substack.com. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Welcome to the world of The 49.
The man pointing the arrow at Diez's chest took a step closer. The arrow was shiny, flat. It looked strangely ancient and modern. All at once, it would slice through his bone and flesh, with no thick bear hide or winter layer of fat to impede its destructive path to his heart. The word of God is living and active, sharper than a double-edged sword. If he lived, he'd have a new anecdote for one of his online homilies. "Were you expecting the governor?" Diez asked. He was still sucking air from nearly drowning on the beach. His heart was racing from the physical strain, the pain on his leg, the unexpected brush with death. "We weren't expecting this." The man thrust the arrow toward him. Diez tried to move, but he was too slow. The arrow was against his neck. "Look at this." The man wasn't talking to him. He looked back at the man, with the bow strung over his shoulder. The man towering over him eased his pull on the bowstring and took the arrow into his hand. He looped it under Diez's collar and pulled up the green cord that held his crucifix. The red ruby at the center of the cross seemed to glow from the square of gold it was set in. "Hell's this?" the man mumbled. He took a quick step back. He took the arrow with him, and the weight of the cross swung back and landed on Diez's collarbone. The green cord that held the wooden cross hung loose out of his shirt, and the cross turned and slid until it fell against Diez's bicep. "Who are you?" the man who shouldered bow asked, clearly the leader. Diez laid back into the sand and rock. He grasped the crucifix in his right hand. He grabbed a handful of sand in the other. "The glory of God is living man," he uttered as he took a deep breath. No one else said a word. "Saint Irenaeus of Lyon," he finally said when he opened his eyes. He looked at the sky. "I'm lucky to be alive. That's who I am. Thanks for taking out my formidable adversary." "It's what we do," the leader of the masked trio asked. "He sent you, didn't he?" "Yes." The man nodded at the person to his left, who dropped his bow too, then walked over to the bear. "You're that priest from the show." "Yes. I didn't recognize you without the underwear." "I get that a lot," Diez said through gritted teeth. "Well, this makes things interesting." He nodded now to the other man, the one who moments earlier could have ended his life and pinned him to the sand like an entomologist pinned his shiny beetles. He disappeared into the trees. Behind Diez, in the water, the man was cutting out the arrow. "These arrowheads are more valuable than the meat we'll feast on from this beast." It was a woman's voice. The company didn't make it through the last few years of chaos, and so they're not being manufactured anymore. Between the camo and the mask, nothing suggested the feminine form. With big game, especially the big grizzlies, getting a blood trails can be difficult. "Oh?" Diez said, feeling less like a prisoner and more like a tourist at a hunting workshop. "Their long hair soaks up blood. Their fat is thick and can plug up entry and exit holes, especially in the months before winter when they're getting ready to hibernate. But he was distracted by you. So, it was an easy tag. Not a moment too soon," Diez said. He sat up. "There's no Foz here, is there?" he asked. The women looked from the shore toward the leader. There was a long, potent silence. "You'd know," is what he finally said. He whistled, and the man who was in the trees returned with two other men. The leader turned to them, as if Diez wasn't there. "Take him to the camp. We'll field dress the kill. Salvage what you can from the boat. I want that hide. We'll address his wound there. Keep it elevated. That cut is deep." Diez looked at his foot for the first time, remembering the injury which still screamed at him, but had become background noise in the surreal situation in which he found himself. The pain in his foot was immense. He was afraid to look at his injury. It wasn't broken. That was clear. But he could see bone. The bear had swiped his ankle, and it was bleeding. Bad. He realized how lightheaded he was, due to the loss of blood. He laid back on the ground. So, what am I? A prisoner? He asked. I don't know yet, the leader of the group replied.
Why do I have the feeling that I'm looking in the mirror? Why do I feel like we're being watched? When he said it, both of the young men looked above them. They stared for a moment, and the cameras caught it. The control room racked its shot and split the screen so that they were mirrors of each other, slowly zooming out to give the audience a sense that they were slowly being pulled in toward the boys, their eyes like tractor beams. Boyer watched from the green room and shook her head. It was incredible streaming. Every device in the corridor was taken over and projecting the images. There was no avoiding it. No matter what one thought of the game, its strange and vital place behind the walls, its problematic nature, its popularity, how it repelled and attracted all at once. This was exactly why. Every story, even though the concept didn't change, was new and compelling. This wasn't a reality series where people were put through increasingly more bizarre challenges or antics, forced to humiliate themselves for some prize. Here they were stripped of their memories through the help of drugs and slowly, incrementally, prompted to tell the truth. At least that's what the show promised. Truth that would set the winner free and doom the loser. The people had the wisdom to decide. The governor and the other powerful technocrats of the corridor entrusted the people with that. They removed the bad actors from the streets. The people delivered the punishment. It was a deterrent and public service all at once. The democratic impulse was still alive and satisfied. Only the people pulled a different lever to engage it, and pulled at it more often than every few years. When rare episodes like the one Boyer and the rest of the corridor now watched unfolding in front of her aired, it put people through the emotional ringer. Transubstantial justice is what some like to call it. It makes the deacons' heads explode, the bishop had chuckled when he explained it to her. Substitutionary. Complete. As people watch, they put themselves in the shoes of the guilty. They convert, in a way, into the perpetrator. They become the person on trial. They project their own guilt onto the subject, perhaps even throw their intentions to break the law onto the alleged criminal they see on screen. Quite a genius invention, he had mused. But it cannot last as justice, for it is not justice. He was so calm about it, so sure, and yet it did not anger him. His stoicism, given everything he had seen in his long life, always surprised her. He had every reason to join the surge, to burn the system down. But he opened his arms to everyone, including the governor. The twins were moving now. They paced around the room and stopped at awkward angles when their bodies came up against the invisible barrier defined by the shadows around them. They were feeling their way around the room, touching at the shadows with their hands. They walked a full circle, in opposite directions until they returned to each other and stood face to face. It was mesmerizing to watch them, as though it was all choreographed. The twin in black briefs put his hands on his hips. It was the first time in the show's history that a contestant didn't wear white. Boyer knew the chat rooms would be buzzing, and that there'd probably be a new line of merch featuring images of the twin, a line of boxer shorts for his fans, holographic anime boyfriends in black underwear, and their AI avatars would storm the internet. It was a clever, pragmatic way to ensure the audience could track and identify them. Where are we? I don't know. This was a moment that many often panicked. Not because they were yet aware of what was going on. That always came later. That was the peak of most episodes. But the boys were calm. Where were we before? Can you remember? No, but I've never been here before. A loud sound, like the boom of thunder, or a loud compression of air filled the room, and the twins instinctively hunched. Both ducked and put up their hands in a defensive posture, their weight falling onto their back feet as though they were being attacked. They were fighters. That was clear. With the sound came a strobe of light. When the flash and sound stopped, the twins slowly eased. The danger had passed. It took them a moment to realize that the object appeared. The control room had cued the audience by cutting to a wide shot after the flash of light. An object, wrapped in butcher paper, was in the foreground. The twins stood like blurs in the background, their shapes vaguely familiar, the white and black cotton centered in the screen. The twin in white slowly came into focus as he stepped toward the object. Each step he took, his body came into clearer focus. When he finally reached down to pick it up, his hands were in perfect high definition. The scar from the web of skin between his index and middle finger that followed the vein of his hand up to the middle of his forearm became visible for the first time. Game show contestant bodies were mapped and highly discussed. Their scars told their story. The crime podcasters had entire series on body maps, and once a verdict was made, they liked to dissect body types. Unique marks like this scar, tattoos. Boyer knew there'd be a flurry of long-form content about what the scar meant once this episode of the game was complete. "What's that?" the twin in black asked. "I don't know. Where'd it come from?" the twin in black asked. He stepped toward his brother. "You tell me. 1 second it wasn't here, then suddenly it was. What is this place?" "Are you going to keep asking these questions?" the twin in white asked. It wasn't mean, it was brotherly, almost funny. He had older brother vibes. "Are you going to open it?" "There you go again with the questions." The twin in white handed it to his brother. "Something's up." They both looked around the room, over their shoulders. "You think?" the brother in black asked. His turned a rib. "We wake up in our gaunch in a well-lit room. No one else around. Trapped and unable to get out. And now an object appears. Of course, something is up." The twin in white took the object back and started to unwrap the paper. "What is it? Give me a second, will ya?" The butcher paper fell to the floor, and the twin in white held a book in his hand. Boyer watched the screen as the cameras cut from overhead shots and tracking shots all punched in on the leather-bound book in his hand. As he turned it over, it was clear it was crafted with care. The leather was a rough sort of animal hide, almost like vellum. On the front cover was a seal of some sort. The screen showed a close-up of it and a split screen of both twins' faces as they looked at the cover, discovering along with the audience what it was. They looked at a shield or crest of some sort. At the top of the crest was a ribbon of golden wheat. The golden crest itself was divided into 4 quadrants by a red cross. There were 4 different images, one in each quadrant. In the top left was a bluebird, its wings spread. It was angled so that its beak pointed to the top left corner of the crest. Beside the bird, in the top right quadrant was an open book, its white pages brightly shining. Beneath it, on the lower right quadrant, were intersecting blue lines, creating a patchwork of spurts like dual hashtags or the lattice crust on the top of a pie. And on the bottom left was a cross of some sort, red with blue outlines, the end of each branch of the crossbeam like buds of a flower. Beneath the crest, a banner with the words "People times Pride times Progress." The twins turned the book over, touched the cover, balanced, one by one, its weight in their hands. "I've seen this before." "I have too," said the boy in black. He brought it to his face and sniffed the pages. "People, pride, progress," he said as he opened the covers. It was blank inside, white pages, like the pages of the book on the crest, empty, shining in the light. "Alliteration," he mused. "Consonants," his brother said. "To be precise." "Have you ever seen a bird so blue?" the boy in black asked. "Not that I can remember, and I have a feeling I may never see one again, even if I have."
Thanks for listening to this portion of The 49 by Andrew Kooman. New content drops for paid subscribers every Monday at the49.substack.com. That's the49.substack.com. On Tuesdays, we release new audio on all your favorite podcast platforms. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe and to share it with a friend. Thanks for listening to The 49.